Plastic waste is likely to triple by 2060. This is not just a global problem about physical pollution, but about the huge effect on public health and climate change. So why, when 170 nations gathered in Geneva to address the problem, was it so hard to agree a treaty to actually do something about it? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, the plastic clogging our rivers and oceans is easy to see, but scientists warn of a less obvious danger: the plastics in our bodies and food. Single-use plastic, found in everything from packaging to medical supplies, is behind the toxic exposure to our bodies and environmental damage to our homes. Can the UN bridge international divisions to keep us safe and change how plastics are made, used and disposed of?
The talks in Geneva started with cheers and enthusiasm.
For the first time in history, the world is within a reach of a legally binding international instrument to end plastic pollution.
But it ended where it stopped in 2022, in a failure, with no agreement on a treaty to halt plastic production or regulate harmful chemicals.
It is about closing a wound that we're leaving open in people's lawns, in our rivers, in our oceans. But the text presented here makes that wound fatal, and we will not accept it. This is simply repulsive. It is not ambition, it is surrender.
Each year, the world produces 430 million tons of plastic. Scientists estimate nearly 200 trillion pieces are floating in oceans and waterways, and the number is rising. It's everywhere, in the water we drink, the food we eat, and the air we breathe. And although plastic can be reused and recycled, in reality only 10% of it actually is. Around 60% is single-use. Like so much, it is international disagreements that prevent a solution. Nearly 100 countries support an ambitious treaty, but oil-producing nations like Russia and Saudi Arabia oppose limits on production, preferring instead to focus on recycling. So can the world find a solution to plastic pollution before it's too late?
Well, let's bring in our guests on this. I'm delighted to say, joining me in the studio today, we have Liana Hosea. She is an environmental journalist, filmmaker, and founder of Watershed Investigations. In Geneva, Switzerland, we have Patrick Schroeder. Patrick is Senior Research Fellow at the Environment and Society Centre at Chatham House. We also have Hellen Dena. She is Project Lead at the Pan-African Plastics Project. And Roman Peter, co-founder of Trash Hero World, an organisation focused on reducing plastic pollution. You're all very welcome to this important roundtable. Hellen, to you first of all, why has it taken so long to get anywhere near an agreement on this?
Thank you for having me. So we see that we have majority of the member states or the governments really who will desire to come out of Geneva with a really strong, legally binding treaty. But then there's the handful of, petrochem states, fossil fuel lobbies who have been really in this negotiation from the onset, and they want to derail the process, they want to be the blockers. And really, we've seen that they are looking at things like only considering the downstream measures and looking at a treaty that will not only be fit for purpose, but a treaty that will only be a waste management treaty. And so we have two sides pulling on different directions. Unfortunately, even if there are a handful, they're still derailing this process. And that is why we are at where we are right now.
Thanks, Helen. Let's bring in Roman. Roman, so we're going to have plastic production tripling in a few years' time, in a few decades. I mean, we're swimming in this stuff as it is. How worried should we be?
Well, at that point, we need to be as worried as possible. We have enough evidence this plastic threatens our health, the environment, and not just the ocean like we talked 10 years ago. We have so much evidence that it threatens the next generations to come. And so it's an absolute emergency.
Patrick, just come in on this. How concerned are you about the sheer volume of plastic being produced?
Yes, it's definitely a concern. And as you said, it's projected to triple. So even at the moment, we don't have the capacity to manage all the plastic waste that is being produced. And our ability to control plastics will even decrease the more is being put in the market. So there's various aspects of the treaty to how to address that in terms of new design standards for products, but also looking at what types of plastic products are problematic and would need to be phased out over time. Plus additional capacity and finance for especially countries in the global south that are facing the brunt of the pollution. And all of these are complicated issues, and there are different perspectives or country positions on this that still need to be worked out.
Thanks, Patrick. Liana, to you. So 10 million tons of plastic a year are flowing into our seas year on year. We've turned our oceans into a plastic soup.
Yes, that's right. I mean, if you think there's about, at the moment, 8 billion tons of plastic waste currently on the Earth, according to the UNEP, and that's equivalent in mass to about 1.2 million Great Pyramids of Giza, enough to encircle the Earth 6 times. So you've got environmental reports saying that by 2050, there's going to be more plastic in the sea by weight than fish. So you can see how in the near future, we're going to be drowning in plastic. And, you know, we think we have a good waste management system. It's a lie. Most of this plastic ends up in landfill or is burnt in incinerators. And, you know, that releases toxic pollutants into the atmosphere, as well as carbon dioxide. So it's a driver of climate change.
Thank you. Hellen, to you, what was the vibe like at the conference, the summit, on sorting this out? Do you genuinely feel that leaders understand the damage plastic is doing to our countries and our collective environment?
Look, most of them do understand, and I think, you know, from, you know, the late nights and all the hard work that has been put into these negotiations, and, you know, the previous negotiations really show that, you know, the world is really looking at a treaty that will be able to solve this not just environmental crisis, but also health crisis. But progress has been slow. You know, there's been, you know, going back and forth on articles, countries not really agreeing, countries adding more text, and, you know, having, you know, really a back and forth. And yesterday, the chair came up with a draft, very weak draft. You know, it felt like a gift to petrochem industry, and, you know, really a betrayal to humanity, because the gift, the draft lacked, you know, binding measures. It just speaks of voluntary, you know, measures. It lacks ambition. You know, it's really not what we have been hoping for in this process. So as much as we want to get a treaty, I think the one thing that we do not want to do is go back home with a weak treaty.
Thanks, Hellen. Roman, how strong is this pro-plastics lobby then? There's a lot of money involved in this.
It is a lot of money. And we also see a big increase of lobbying from the petrochemical and the oil industry over the last rounds of negotiations. Here in Geneva, they're officially the ones they could identify. There are more than 234. That almost doubled up since INC 2 or 3. So there are more and more. So we can see that they pay a lot of attention and they try everything to get a weak treaty.
Patrick, tell me about your concerns that Liana raised about plastic being burnt. What's in this plastic that people might toss in a bonfire or incinerate? Talk to me about your concerns about the chemicals that we're releasing into our environment and the atmosphere.
Yes, that's a really good question, because it's not only the plastic waste that we can see, but also the thousands of chemicals which are in plastics. And there have been a number of studies looking at around 16,000 different types of chemicals in plastics, and over 4,000 of these are potentially harmful to human health, but haven't been properly assessed. And these chemicals migrate out of plastics into not only the environment, but also the human body. For example, when it's being burnt into the air, but also actually during use phase, we're already exposed to many of these chemicals. So this treaty is not only about the environment, but it's actually also about human health. And that's actually been also one of the issues of debate, whether health should be included. And many of the scientists that are here at the Geneva negotiations want to see health being included in the treaty.
So, Patrick, we're poisoning ourselves by burning all this plastic.
We are over the long term. There are obviously many communities that are directly affected by it. So communities, often in developing countries, but also small island states, in particular, who don't have waste management facilities or collection and cannot deal with this material in the correct way. So these communities are most impacted, and that's where the questions around what types of finance mechanism, what types of capacity building, what types of technologies need to be transferred to reduce the impact on the communities.
Thank you. Liana, talk to me about single-use plastic. 60% of all plastic is single-use. Now, I walk around London every morning. I see a small army of people with their cups of coffee and cups of tea and what have you. And these cups are lined with a plastic that can't be recycled. So as long as it takes someone to drink that coffee, 10, 15 minutes, that then lives forever.
Yeah, plastic starts off as really convenient and then is really inconvenient for the next several hundred years. Most plastic actually can't be recycled. So, of course, you've got this single-use plastic that can't be recycled, but only 9% of plastic is currently recycled globally because the rest of it is just too hazardous, so it's not profitable. It's actually quite difficult to recycle plastic. There's so many different types of plastic. And what plastic is, obviously, are the kind of molecules from mostly crude oil. That's mostly what the basics of what plastic is. It's kind of like the pasta. And then to make it, make it durable or spongy or give it whatever properties you want to have, you have to put the chemicals, kind of like the sauce, to give it those, variations. But then when it comes to recycling, this makes it incredibly difficult. So often recycling, in the best case scenario, plastic degrades. The more you recycle it, it often gets more toxic than when you recycle it. And you probably only can recycle, in the best case scenario, 7 to 10 times, and then it's into the landfill or burned in an incinerator.
You said that plastic degrades. I read that if King Henry VIII, who lived in the Middle Ages in England, if he had used plastic shopping bags, they would not have broken down by now.
Right, which is why a lot of the people at the treaty, when you talk about the scientists at the treaty, want to have a cap on plastic production, because already we cannot deal with the levels of plastic.
Thanks, Liana. Hellen, to you, just on the issue of single-use plastic, how much of this should be on individuals? All of our behaviour, our purchases, our consumption of plastic, how much do you think we need to change as consumers and shoppers when it comes to plastic?
Yeah, so we usually talk about, the responsibility lies with everyone. But in my opinion, I think the responsibility here lies with the producers, the manufacturers, because look, if a product is packaged in plastic and that is the only way to, deliver this product, then consumers really do not have much of a choice. So we need to look at the origin of, the problem or the source of the problem. And this is, when the manufacturers actually, look at plastics as, cheap, convenient, And for them, it's really about the profit, and it's about making really good money out of plastics. And so really the people who should be held accountable in this instance, the biggest accountability goes to the producers of plastics. When you come to the consumers, of course, we still call for behavior change. And it's very simple things. Carrying a reusable cup or bottle such as this instead of buying a plastic bottle every time you need a sip of water, and things like that. Carrying a reusable bag as you go for grocery shopping. These are some of the things that we can do really, but I think we need to look at this at the source. Let the big plastic industry rethink, reinvest in research and development in order to come up with alternative delivery channels, alternative packaging channels. We also encourage refill and reuse because that has also been proven to be a safe alternative to plastic. So if we are reusing, we have a system where we do refill and reuse, then we'll be able to cut down on the plastics that we use and ultimately what goes into the environment.
Thanks, Helen. Roman, just show our viewers your T-shirt and tell me what it means to be a trash hero, please. Just let us see your T-shirt. So tell us about your organization. How can we all be trash heroes?
Basically, and I couldn't agree more with Helen, one thing is the system change, and that is the most important. And as Trash Hero, as the organization and network, we try globally to motivate communities to reduce their waste from the beginning, because we need to look at the whole life cycle of plastic. It's not just that trash is there at some point; it has been produced somewhere, and there are chemicals added, etc. And one thing is plastic and health for us, and many others, the waste management, and that we cannot really recycle it. So that gives motivation to communities to reduce it from the beginning. And that's what we do globally on a community-based level. And we bring that data also where we do a lot of cleanups, but we would sort the plastic by brand to call out the top polluters. And we will bring that data also here to the negotiations.
Thanks, Roman. Patrick, when I go to the supermarket, it really, really annoys me when I see fruit and veg needlessly wrapped in reams of plastic. Cucumbers, bananas, all sorts of fruit and veg. Mother Nature gave it a really good, robust skin. Why do plastic producers feel the need, or supermarkets feel the need, to have all this plastic coated across produce?
Yes, I feel the same when I go to the supermarket. I know exactly what you mean. There are lots of unnecessary plastics and used in packaging, and these could be eliminated. And part of the treaty is also about what are the criteria that we need to develop globally to identify these unnecessary plastic products. There's packaging is one area. There's other sectors in which plastics is being used. One of my examples, what I see at airports often, is when people get their suitcases into lots of plastics wrapping. I think that's a very also useless approach to using the material. There's then different ways how we can do this. And that's also part of the plastics treaty. And actually many businesses want to see this extended producer responsibility as a main policy approach. That is being developed in the UK, being applied in the UK. Many other countries are developing it. And this can be used to encourage more sustainable design, more sustainable use of the material. And it also helps to make polluters pay. Basically, based on the amount of materials of plastics that's being put on the market, companies are being charged a fee that they need to then that fee is then being used for plastic waste management and other methods. So these policy approaches need to be then implemented on national level, and there's a link between the treaty and what happens in individual countries.
Thanks, Patrick. Liana, this is clearly big business.
Yes, and that's why there are lots of lobbyists at the treaty trying to prevent a cap on production. Obviously, no one is calling for a ban on plastic. There are real essential uses for plastic in medicine and so forth, but there are other uses which, we just don't need to have. But I think there are certain countries, obviously, petroleum producing countries, because that's the main ingredient. The Saudi Arabia, Russia, Iran, and the US also doesn't seem to want, a cap on production either. And so they are lobbying against this measure.
Tell me, that projection for plastic production to triple by the year 2060, I mean, we're swimming in this stuff as it is. What do you think planet Earth will look like in 25, 35 years' time?
Well, if, in 2022, it was 475 million tons of plastic waste being produced. And if that's number annually, and if that triples by 2060, that's going to be equivalent in weight to 240 Great Pyramids of Giza annually, so
every year.
Yes. So this is a huge amount of plastic, and I'm not sure how we're going to cope with it.
Hellen, talk to me about recycling, because we're all doing our absolute best and we all think we're being green and environmental, but only about 10% of plastic is actually recycled. Is that correct?
That is correct. And recycling is not a solution. It is not enough to solve this crisis. If you go back to my continent, Africa, whenever you walk in the big cities, you find heaps and heaps of, trash in the oceans, even wildlife consuming this trash. So it's a matter of not having, enough recycling facilities. The toxicity that comes with recycling plastics, every time you hear about, all these initiatives or, plastic being recycled to, make bricks, to create, other material that is usable. What we don't usually see and what we don't usually, really think about is the entire process of recycling, the amount of toxins that are released into, the environment, the exposure that happens for the people who really work at this recycling industry. The other bit is about, when you talk about the 10%. So, for instance, I want to give an example. In Kenya, we have, a local initiative, of recycling, and they're making bricks and other building material. And when we visited that place and had a chat with the owner, so if you have a bottle, like maybe a Coca-Cola bottle, what they use is only the lid, and the rest of the material, like the entire bottle, gets tossed back into the environment. And so we're looking at big industries such as your Coca-Cola, your Unilevers, really greenwashing and preaching that we've been able to collect and recover and recycle 70%, but really what is on paper and what is the reality on the ground, completely different. So recycling is not enough to solve this crisis, and that is why we need globally binding rules and regulation that will be able to take us from where we are at the moment. But if we continue business as usual, the same trajectory, we are really looking at a crisis that is going to triple as we have been talking about.
Thanks, Hellen. Roman, to you, Hellen just used the phrase business as usual. That is not an option here.
No, that's not an option. We need to see, very easy, if you have your plastic container, for example, and you put a soup in there, and now, especially if you heat it up, you have a lot more chemicals that move from the plastic in your soup. Also, if you don't heat it up, but if you heat it up more, now you're gonna eat those chemicals with you that cause all kind of stuff like cancer. It's in connection with ADHD, fertility, lots of things that come out. Now you put that container in your dishwasher and put that tap in the dishwasher to wash it. Now the chemicals from the tap in the dishwasher migrate in that plastic, right? So, and it migrates both ways. So next time you eat the same soup, you also have those chemicals from that. If we talk about recycling, and if you would use that plastic bottle, for example, to spray pesticides in your garden, or in some countries, it's used secondhand for gasoline to fill up motorbikes. now the chemicals of the pesticides or the gasoline move into the plastic. If you now collect that bottle and it goes into the PET recycling, the recycled plastic contains a mixed bomb of chemicals that is not controllable. So recycling is not the option, and it can actually make the problem even worse. So we need to see where we can cut as much as possible, focus on reuse, on repair, and not on recycling first, on all the other options.
Thank you, Roman. Patrick, just as we finish the conversation, we have one hell of a battle on our hands here. Can we win this?
Yes, I think so. It's never too late. Obviously, it's a massive challenge, but this is, again, where the world needs to come together to solve this collectively. So the realization over the years, individual countries or individual companies cannot solve that together. So that's why the UN has been convening this over the last few years, beginning in not only 2022 when there was the UNIA resolution, but even before. But it's a very complicated issue. That's why it's been taking so long. And I think we're on a very steep learning curve, everybody together, governments, civil society, business, to understand the complexities of the problem. But because it's a problem that we created, it's also a problem that we can solve.
Patrick, thank you. And to Helen, Roman and Liana here in the studio as well. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.